Gemini, don't tell everything. Someone is testing your wisdom. Pause for a moment. Listen, not with your ears, but with your soul. There's something you've been feeling but haven't quite been able to name. A shift. A tension. A sense that every conversation lately has hidden layers, subtle cues, and unspoken motives. You're not imagining it. This is not just a season of communication, it's a season of discernment. And as the sign of thought, expression, and duality, you're being tested not on how much you can say, but on how wisely you choose not to. There's someone watching, not to harm you, but to see if you are ready for what's next. They are listening, not just to your words, but to your silences. They are offering you an opportunity cloaked in small talk. A door that will only open if you prove you can hold space without filling it. You see, Gemini, your gift has always been your voice. But now, your power lies in your restraint. So before we go further, I ask you this. Are you willing to question your own patterns of communication? Are you ready to uncover what truly lies behind the words you share and the ones you don't? Because this moment is not casual, it's spiritual. It's not just about what you say, it's about who you're becoming. If this resonates with something stirring deep within you, I invite you to like, share, and subscribe. What comes next might change not only your conversations, but your life. Gate 1, the hidden test, when your words are being weighed. Gemini, you've always believed that your words are your greatest gift, and in many ways, that's true. You know how to spin thoughts into golden threads. You're the weaver of connection, the translator of emotion, the master of articulation. But what if I told you that right now, your words are not just being heard, they are being measured? Someone close to you, perhaps in your professional circle, your family, or even your personal life, is testing you. Not obviously, not cruelly, but with precise, calculated interest. They are observing your responses, not just to see what you say, but how you say it and whether you should have said it at all. This is a moment of discernment, a test of spiritual maturity disguised as casual conversation. And here's the truth most people won't say aloud. Gemini, your brilliance can become a liability when it's unguarded. There are times in life when too much transparency invites scrutiny, when speaking too freely opens doors that should have remained shut. And right now, you are standing at one of those crossroads. You may have already noticed the signs. Strange pauses in conversations, slight shifts in tone, a subtle glance that lingers too long after you've shared something vulnerable. Questions that feel oddly specific, like someone trying to mine your soul with a smile. This is not paranoia. This is perception. The person testing you may not be an enemy. In fact, they may be someone who genuinely admires you. But admiration alone is not enough. They need to trust you. They are watching to see if you possess the self-control, the wisdom, and the spiritual restraint required for what's coming next. It might be a new opportunity, a confidential role, a deeper relationship, a delicate truth they want to reveal. But before they hand you the key, they need to know, can you hold silence like sacred ground? This is where your Gemini instincts may work against you. You love to explain, to connect, to fill the gaps. Silence can feel awkward to you, a signal that something's wrong. So you jump in, elaborating when a simple answer would do. You offer context when none was requested. You share personal stories to maintain harmony, unaware that every word is giving more than it should. But Gemini, in this season, your spiritual growth is found in what you withhold. Because not all communication is connection. Sometimes it's a trap, not in a malicious sense, but in the way that life often tests us to see if we're ready to rise. Think of it this way. Leaders are chosen not by how well they speak, but by how well they discern when to speak. Intimacy is built not on oversharing, but on earned vulnerability. Trust is forged in the sacred space of discretion. And right now, the universe is asking you, are you still performing, or are you prepared? Prepared for a new level of influence, a new quality of connection, a new era of respect. But first, you must pass the test. And the test is this. Can you pause before you speak? Can you resist the urge to over-explain? Can you sense when a question is truly about curiosity and when it's about control? There are 5 signs that you're in the middle of this hidden test. Let me show you. 1. The probing pause. Someone asks a personal question, then goes quiet. They aren't just listening to your answer. They're watching your body language. They're measuring your comfort. 2. The confidential loop. Someone shares something private with you, then brings it up later in an indirect way to see if you kept it to yourself. 3. The conviction challenge. Someone makes a bold or controversial statement, not to argue, but to see if you'll parrot their opinion just to avoid tension. 4. The loyalty dilemma. You're asked to choose between pleasing the crowd and protecting a one-on-one bond. 5. The information gap. They leave something out intentionally to see if you'll respect the boundary or dig deeper out of curiosity. Gemini, these aren't games. They are sacred initiations. Every one of these moments is an invitation for you to evolve into a new kind of communicator, not the one who dazzles, but the one who discerningly protects. Yes, your natural impulse is to share, to create ease, to maintain flow. But in doing so, you may be missing the deeper flow, the power of intentional silence. When you don't answer right away, you signal emotional maturity. When you speak simply, you suggest confidence. When you leave space in the conversation, you allow truth to rise naturally. And ironically, that's what draws the right people closer. You don't need to prove your value through stories or charm. Your energy speaks before your mouth does. You are being asked now to step into a new identity, not just as a communicator, but as a keeper of wisdom. Not every thought is meant to be shared. Not every truth is meant to be told. Not every silence is meant to be filled. The next time someone asks you a personal question, try this. Pause for 2 seconds. Breathe. Then ask yourself, is this worth sharing? Is this moment about connection or curiosity? Is this an opportunity to speak or an invitation to protect? You'll be amazed by the shift that follows. You'll see people lean in, sensing your strength. You'll notice who respects your mystery and who resents your silence. You'll begin to attract a different kind of energy. Not the energy that consumes, but the energy that honors. And most of all, Gemini, you'll begin to feel something you haven't felt in a long time. Sovereignty over your own voice. This is your first gate, a powerful one, and you've just stepped through it. Gate 2, when oversharing delays destiny, the chapter that must close. Gemini, there's something you need to hear, but not with your ears, with your heart, with that quiet knowing that lives just beneath your thoughts. You've been carrying a story far too long. One where openness was always seen as strength. One where saying everything on your mind meant you were being real, honest, transparent. But now, that very story is asking to be rewritten. Because there comes a moment, just once in a lifetime, when an old way of relating must be put to rest so that your future can finally find you. This is that moment. And it's not dramatic. It won't come with lightning or flames. It begins quietly in the space between questions, in the pause before you speak, in the realization that not everyone deserves to know your heart. Gemini, your habit of oversharing didn't begin in pride. It began in pain. You learned early on that talking was safety, that if you could just explain yourself well enough, people would understand you, that if you shared first, others would feel comfortable to stay, that if you kept the energy flowing, the silence wouldn't become rejection. But here's the tender truth. Not every silence was abandonment. Some silences were sacred, and you filled them because no one ever taught you to sit with your own mystery. Let me offer you a story. There was once a Gemini woman named Alina, brilliant, magnetic, emotionally intelligent. She had a way of turning strangers into confidants with nothing more than a smile and a story. But deep down, she was tired. She kept finding herself in the same cycle, opening her heart too quickly, revealing her past too early, offering access to people who hadn't earned her trust. In one particular relationship, she met someone who seemed deeply interested in her. He asked thoughtful questions, listened attentively, and so she opened up. She told him about her childhood wounds, her biggest fears, her spiritual journey. She thought they were building intimacy. What she didn't know was he was listening to learn her weaknesses. And when conflict came, he used her words against her. Not overtly, subtly, with cold precision. Alina didn't just lose the relationship. She lost her voice for a while, because in giving too much of herself away, she had nowhere left to retreat. Her story is not rare, Gemini. You, too, may have shared parts of yourself in spaces that weren't sacred. Not because you were foolish, but because your nature is giving. But there comes a time when giving becomes leaking. And when you leak your truth to the wrong people, it doesn't just drain you, it delays your destiny. Because while you were trying to be understood, the universe was waiting for you to understand yourself. The deeper layer is this. Your words are not just expressions. They are spells. Every time you tell your story, you reinforce it. And if you keep telling the same story, especially to those who don't deserve it, you stay stuck in the same chapter. You keep reopening wounds that were meant to scar over and teach you. You keep repeating lessons that were meant to evolve you. Gemini, this is not a punishment. This is an awakening. Because now you're being asked to do something radical. Close the chapter. Not burn it, not regret it, but seal it with wisdom. You may need to leave behind an old relationship dynamic, one where you were always the entertainer, the confessor, the emotional guide. You may need to walk away from conversations where you are always explaining yourself just to feel worthy. You may even need to go silent for a while, not as withdrawal, but as rebirth. This is the season where your spiritual growth will come not from what you say, but from what you choose to withhold. You are not responsible for teaching everyone how to treat you. You are responsible for deciding who gets access to your inner world. Let's make it more real. Think about your current circle. Who always asks for your insight, but rarely offers theirs? Who knows everything about your struggles, but you know nothing of theirs? Who pressures you to be real, but disappears when your truth isn't convenient? These are not safe spaces, Gemini. These are performance stages. And you're not a performer anymore. You're a soul in transition. You don't owe your backstory to every curious listener. You don't owe vulnerability to people who weaponize intimacy. You don't owe the whole truth just because someone asked nicely. Sometimes, the most powerful sentence you can say is, "I'd rather not talk about that," and then let the silence do its work. Because in that silence, a new version of you begins to form. One who does not overshare to be accepted. One who does not perform to feel seen. One who knows that their story is sacred, and only those who walk with honor may enter. So yes, Gemini, some doors will close as you close this chapter. Some people may grow distant. Some conversations may fall away. Let them. Because in their place, new people will come. People who value your depth more than your drama, your silence more than your noise, your presence more than your performance. But they can only find you when you stop repeating the same chapter for an audience that's not listening. This is the turning point. Not because you're erasing the past, but because you're reclaiming your future. The Gemini who gave everything away with words is gone. The Gemini who speaks with intention, power, and discernment has arrived. Gate 3, the love that waits in silence. When Gemini attracts soul-level intimacy. Gemini, now that you've begun to retreat from the noise, can you feel it? The space, the stillness, the soft echo of your own heartbeat finally rising above the voices of everyone else. It's not loneliness, it's sacred solitude, and something divine is waiting for you there. You see, all this time, you thought love would come when you said the perfect words, when you revealed the right story, when you opened up fast enough to spark connection. You mistook quick rapport for resonance. You equated shared secrets with shared souls. But Gemini, soul intimacy doesn't rise from overexposure. It blooms from alignment. It's quiet. It's slow. It's discerning. It comes to those who have learned to sit in silence without shrinking. It comes to those who no longer beg to be seen but embody visibility. And it comes to those who no longer offer their whole history as proof of their worth. In truth, spiritual love arrives only when we stop chasing it through conversation and start becoming it in presence. Let me tell you about Leo, a Gemini man who had always been magnetic, charming, and endlessly curious. He could turn strangers into lovers in one night through the power of his words. But his relationships always ended the same way, abruptly, confusingly, painfully. He'd say, I told them everything. I shared my dreams, my past, my pain. I was so open. And yet, no one stayed. Until he met someone different. This person didn't ask 1,000 questions. They didn't dig for confessions. They didn't rush the connection. In fact, they often sat with long pauses, looked him in the eye, and simply waited. At first, Leo felt nervous. He filled the silences, told more stories, tried harder, but one day he stopped. He allowed the stillness. And in that moment, something shifted. The other person leaned in, smiled softly, and said, "Now I feel you." It wasn't the words that drew her closer. It was his presence, his willingness to stop performing, to be with her, not above her in conversation, not behind a wall of witty remarks, but with her, soul to soul. This, Gemini, is the intimacy your soul has been waiting for. Not the kind that requires constant explanation, not the kind that thrives on emotional overexposure, but the kind that recognizes you before you say a single word. And to receive that kind of love, you must first become a sanctuary, not a broadcaster, not a storyteller, a sanctuary. You must cultivate the energy of someone who doesn't need to be figured out in the first 5 minutes. Someone who lets their silence speak volumes. Someone who trusts that what's meant for them will feel them, even when they're quiet. Because here's the divine secret. The more deeply you respect your emotional privacy, the more magnetic you become to those who value emotional safety. You attract what you protect. The more you preserve your story, the more you call in those who will treat it like scripture, not entertainment. The more you resist the urge to explain, the more you invite those who can sense your truth through your energy alone. The more you love yourself in your stillness, the more you become visible to someone seeking depth, not distraction. This is what real love requires of you now, Gemini. It doesn't want your vulnerability on command. It doesn't want your cleverness. It wants your rootedness. Can you stay soft without collapsing? Can you hold eye contact without filling it with nervous talk? Can you be present without needing to be impressive? Because that's where spiritual love lives. It's in the long walks with no agenda, the conversations that breathe between words, the relationships where silence is not a void, but a vessel. Yes, it may feel foreign at first. You're used to dazzling, to delighting. You've been told your charm is your superpower, but your stillness is the real magic. And when you begin to embody it, you'll notice the shift. People will speak to you more slowly. They'll tell you things they've never said before. They'll ask permission to enter your world. They'll respect your pauses, and they'll hear the music in your silences. Because they'll sense what the old connections missed. You are no longer offering intimacy as performance. You are offering it as presence. And only those aligned with that vibration will stay. So, let this be your vow, Gemini. You will no longer seek love by giving everything away. You will no longer equate early vulnerability with closeness. You will no longer trade your mystery for attention. Instead, you will sit back in your divine knowing. You will choose your words like incense, intentional, fragrant, sacred. You will trust that what is truly meant for you will not require performance. It will ask for presence. And when it comes, you will recognize it. Because it won't ask, "Tell me everything." It will say, "Be here with me." It will make space for your pauses. It will not flinch at your stillness. It will echo your own inner voice back to you and say, "I see you." That, Gemini, is the soul love you've been speaking over all your life, without even realizing it. And now that you've gone quiet, it can finally hear you. Gate 4, Silent Power, when Gemini becomes a trusted gatekeeper. Gemini, something inside you has shifted. Do you feel it? The urgency to explain yourself is fading. The desire to be understood is being replaced by a desire to be aligned. And most of all, the voice that used to speak to prove worth is now speaking from wholeness. You've walked a long way from the Gemini who filled every silence. And now, you're becoming someone few ever expect. A quiet force, a spiritual gatekeeper, a presence that people instinctively respect, even if they can't explain why. This is the transformation that only few make, because it's not visible at first. It doesn't come with applause, but it comes with access. Gemini, when you master the art of strategic silence, you unlock a dimension of influence that cannot be taught, only embodied. Let's speak plainly. The world watches more than it listens. In social spaces, professional networks, and even in sacred relationships, people are always gauging. Who leaks energy? Who gossips under the guise of storytelling? Who speaks prematurely just to be seen? And who holds wisdom like a flame, careful not to burn but always ready to illuminate? The Gemini you are becoming now is no longer the messenger for anyone and everyone. You are the keeper of keys. Let me give you a real story. There was a Gemini woman named Eliza. In her early career, she was known as the talker. Bright, magnetic, energetic. People loved her stories, her insights, her emotional openness. But despite her talent, she was never chosen for high-level decisions. She was loved, but not trusted, until she met a mentor, one who didn't praise her words, but challenged her silences. He said, "You have the brilliance to lead." But leaders don't speak to be heard. They speak when it changes the room. It hurt, but it landed. So Eliza began to observe before speaking. She became comfortable saying, "I'll get back to you." She learned to say less, and say it with weight. And something strange happened. People started treating her differently. Leaders asked for her input in private. Her name was mentioned in rooms she had never entered. She became a woman of reputation, not by marketing herself, but by mastering when to speak and when to hold. Gemini, this is the frequency you're stepping into. No longer the entertainer. Now the energetic filter through which clarity flows. But make no mistake, this isn't about being quiet for quiet's sake. It's about being so anchored in truth that your silence speaks louder than noise. This is inner reputation, not what people say about you on the surface, but what they feel when your name comes up. She's solid. He doesn't spill. They know when to speak and when to hold. And that reputation is a currency. It buys you trust. It earns you entry. It places you in conversations others will never be invited to, but only if you've proven you can carry weight without spilling. Now, let's make this practical. Here are 4 soul-level practices to embody this version of yourself. 1. Respond. Don't react. Before answering personal or complex questions, pause. Not to create drama, but to demonstrate that you think. People respect presence over performance. 2. Master the art of the redirect. When asked something too intimate or too early, learn to pivot. That's something I reflect on privately, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on. Shows strength without shutdown. 3. Treat your life like sacred text. You wouldn't hand your most treasured book to someone with dirty hands. Why hand your story to someone who hasn't earned it? 4. Speak with energetic precision. Instead of offering full paragraphs of your history, learn to distill. Speak like a poet. Leave room for interpretation. It pulls in the right people and filters the wrong ones. This isn't manipulation. This is spiritual mastery. And here's the beautiful paradox. When you no longer rush to share, people beg to hear you. When you no longer explain yourself, people respect you more deeply. When you no longer seek approval, you command presence. And that, Gemini, is what your soul has been craving all along. Not just to be liked, but to be trusted. Because when you are trusted, you are invited. When you are trusted, you are included. When you are trusted, you become the one who is whispered about in reverence, not noise. But more than all of that, when you trust yourself to hold your energy, you finally feel safe in your own skin. You walk into rooms knowing, I don't need to be the loudest. I am the frequency shift. That's what your healing has led to. Not just more relationships, but deeper ones. Not just more visibility, but greater authority. Not just more expression, but sacred communication. Gemini, this is your moment of anointing. Your words now carry weight. Your silences carry shape. Your energy is no longer scattered. It's sovereign. So as you move forward, remember, people will feel your power before they hear it. Let that be enough. Let that be your message. Conclusion. You are the silence that moves worlds. Gemini, if you've made it here, you already know this was never about learning how to talk better. This was about learning how to listen to the voice within, the one that doesn't shout but whispers your power back to you. You were never meant to be loud just to be heard. You were meant to carry a frequency so clear, so intentional, that even your silence changes the room. The person you were, the open book, the over-explainer, the peacekeeper through performance, was never wrong. They were surviving.
But now?
Now you're not surviving. You're remembering. You're returning. You are no longer leaking wisdom to the undeserving. You are no longer auditioning for love with your vulnerability. You are no longer speaking over your own intuition. What you've gained here is not just a new communication style. It is a new identity. One that speaks with reverence. One that trusts the pause. One that knows that mystery is not manipulation, it is magnetism. Every gate you've passed has brought you here. Gate 1 asked you to see the test. Gate 2 asked you to release the old stories. Gate 3 asked you to feel the difference between connection and resonance. Gate 4 asked you to stand in your sacred stillness and become a leader not by voice, but by presence.
And now?
Now you stand at the threshold of a new life, not ruled by the need to be understood, but guided by the wisdom to be selective. So here's your invitation. Speak when it matters, hold when it protects, choose your audience like you choose your prayers, with discernment and sacred trust. The version of you that was always explaining is dissolving. The version of you that commands silence with grace is arriving. And if this journey touched you, Gemini, if something inside you softened, awakened, or rose with clarity, I invite you to like, share, and subscribe. Not because I told you to, but because your voice now knows when it's time to echo and when it's time to listen. You've passed the test. The next chapter won't require you to speak louder, only to speak truer. You are the silence that moves worlds.